afternoon, good evening everyone, good morning everyone. It's great to see you all here. It's great for you to join us at home, so it's wonderful. It's wonderful I can take my mask off just to do this bit. So it's worth volunteering. Good. So today I'm going to carry on with the series in about perseverance. And I really want to look at issues around fairness, compassion and commitment, as the message says, and the verses I'll read. But what Jesus calls justice, mercy and faithfulness, and how we persevere in those. Those are big topics, but we'll start to unpack those. I don't know about you, but I find some of the rules we have to follow can be quite confusing at times. I was in Revive the other day, and they had one instruction one day from I think it was from the BBC side, and then you read the government side, and it said something you could do it, and then we got a letter from the council that said you couldn't do it. You know, which was like waiter or not waiter service, for example, in the cafe. So there's lots of rules around this, and you know, the rules of six, the rule of hand washing, the rule of face masks, and you know, kids in schools are in bubbles, and all those rules. They can sort of take over our lives, can't they? They can sort of become the big thing, and the main issue. And really, the main issue is actually one of love. The big issue is the extent to which we love God, we love other people, and you know, part of the reason for having face masks on isn't for your benefit; it's for other people's benefit. Yeah. So we're trying to love one another. And I do want to follow what Nathan said last week. He preached one of the verses was from Hebrews chapter 13. It said, "Through Jesus, therefore, let us continually offer to God a sacrifice of praise, the fruit of lips that openly profess His name." And then the next verse, which he touched on, it says, "And do not forget to do good and to share with others, for with such sacrifices God is pleased." And as I said, that doing good is act of love. And Jesus defined two of the main sort of commandments, laws in the Bible as being love God and love your neighbour. And what I want to do is really to unpack some of those and what that means. And there's a clue in some verses. You'll wonder why I'm reading these verses, because they're about the verses in the middle of what's called the seven woes that Jesus sort of pronounced over the scribes and Pharisees in the week before that he got crucified. And the middle ones are always significant when you get sort of odd numbers like 7. So the fourth one is really important. And it says this, and this is from Matthew's Gospel, and Matthew 23 and verse 23 and 24. It says, "Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You give 1/10 of your spices, mint, dill and cumin, but you have neglected the more important matters of the law, justice, mercy and faithfulness. You should have practiced the latter without neglecting the former. You blind guides, you strain out a gnat but swallow a camel." I'm not going to talk about gnats and camels, but so I don't quite fully understand it. But the previous bits, he says, you've neglected the more important matters of the law, and I quite often I feel that because we're so tied up in obeying all the rules, and Jesus is saying here it's absolutely right that you obey those rules. So what I say today is nowhere saying that those rules aren't important. They are. But I just want us to focus again on some of the really important issues, which is about the extent to which we love other people and we love God. So he's really saying to the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, he's saying these rules that you do, they were measuring out sort of 1/10 of their herbs. Now I don't know if you have ever done that. I can't imagine why they would want to do that. And give those to somebody else. I mean, if you came to me with some of your herbs and said, "Look, I've saved these for you," I'd be very grateful. Not much, but I'd be relatively grateful. And so I'm not quite sure why they did that, but it's sort of symbolic of the way they were looking at the little things and really ignoring some of the big things. And again, I stress, Jesus is saying, these are important you do these, but these things. It's important that you give. It's important that you set aside some of your income to provide for others. But there's some other really important things that you haven't done. And those things are the things that the Jewish people should have been following throughout the Old Testament. So these weren't necessarily new ideas. It's just they weren't following them. Hosea says, it says, "For I desire mercy, not sacrifice, an acknowledgement of God," which is really about faithfulness, rather than burnt offerings. And there's an interesting piece in the prophet Zechariah, who lived about 400 years before Christ, and was prophesying at the time when the people had returned to Jerusalem, and they were starting to build the temple, and they got some instructions that they could build the temple, and then they got some instructions from the local authority, if you like, that said they should stop building the temple. And then they got instruction that said they could build the temple, so they started again. And then they got instruction that said they couldn't build the temple. So it's sounding a bit like, if you're in a lockdown area, that's probably what you feel at this point in time. And yet, in the midst of all that confusion, all that uncertainty, and returning to Jerusalem after being exiled for 70 years, God says this through Zechariah, and it's in Zechariah chapter 7 and verse 8 to 10. And he says, "And the word of the Lord came again to Zechariah. This is what the Lord Almighty said. Administer true justice, show mercy and compassion to one another. Do not oppress the widow or the fatherless, the foreigner or the poor. Do not plot evil against each other." And it's really saying pretty much what Jesus said to the scribes and the Pharisees, that they should be looking at those really important issues. They were core values to Israel, and I think they're core values to us. And those rules that we should follow are important, but it's just a reminder to persevere, to go after those other core values of justice and mercy and faithfulness. So what do we do? What do these practices mean? And I'm just going to touch on these briefly, but if we take them one at a time, justice is really acting in the right way, and it often, or I'd say always, refers to judgment against wrongdoing, and it's either wrongdoing done by somebody or it's wrongdoing done to somebody, and the things that we should be concerned about. Some of the things that Zechariah talked about is, he talked about the exploitation of the poor and the problems that people come in. There's stories coming out of India of Christians being denied food in the food queue, or having to go to the back of the food queue because they're Christian, and it's just not right. It's not just. And there's a lot of ways that we can practice justice in this world. We do it through Food Bank. Food Bank is about providing food for those who haven't got it. It's providing food for them in a way that doesn't judge them in any way, but is providing them with what they need when they need it. There's other things we can do. Some of us, I know, write letters. You often get quotes from Open Doors and other organisations say, "Can you write letters on behalf of persecuted people overseas?" So you can write to your MPs, and I encourage you to do that actually, and to practice justice. There's campaigns that we can get involved in. I'm not saying that it's necessarily political, but if there's campaigns against some law that you don't like, then that's not going to be just. Then let's complain. Let's state that we're opposed to it. Just coming more personally, you can actually ring somebody who's alone. You can start to engage with them and ring them up and check how they are. supremely, you can pray for people. You can pray for situations. You can pray and make a difference. And we've seen lots of examples, since we've been in lockdown, where people have prayed, but situations have changed. And it's again an encouragement to persevere in praying. It says Jesus came to proclaim justice to the nations. It says that's what he came to do. And in the upside down world of grace, that meant that he took the punishment for your and my sin. It meant that there was justice served, and we all want justice to be served, don't we? We'd hate it if we lived in a world where people got away with murder, literally, and there was no consequences to that. So justice is a really important thing. But in the world of grace in which we live, it's Jesus who took the punishment that we should have. So justice was served, and justice is an attribute of God. And but the punishment came down on Jesus. Romans says this. It says, "Therefore no one will be declared righteous in God's sight by the works of the law. But now, apart from the law, the righteousness of God has been made known. This righteousness is given through faith in Jesus Christ to all who believe. All have sinned and fall short of the glory of God, but all are justified freely by his grace through the redemption that came by Jesus Christ." And part of us being practicing justice is actually to proclaim that grace that says that justice has been served and you are free because of the justice of God, the sacrifice of Jesus on our behalf. So there's actions we can take and there's words we can say that start to implement that idea that we bring justice, that Jesus came to bring justice to the world, and that the grace of God. We proclaim this amazing gospel of grace, and again it's a perseverance with continuing to proclaim that gospel of grace, because it is so important for people to know about it. It's so important that people understand that their sin is atoned for, and yours and my sin is atoned for. And as James says, he says mercy triumphs over judgment. And so the next one we look at is mercy. And it's interesting, throughout the New Testament, the people who came to Jesus often, pretty well always, said to him, "Lord, Son of David, have mercy on me." So the blind man talked about having mercy. The father whose child was epileptic said to Jesus, "Have mercy on me, and have mercy on my son." And the blind men shouted at Jesus, "Son of David, have mercy on us." It was almost that mercy became a sort of a synonym for healing. For I want healing and I need healing. And the amazing thing was that Jesus responded to those cries of mercy. That Jesus is merciful and responded to those cries. And we've got, as I said, lots of examples. We've got somebody here last week who has we prayed for and who was healed from a very, very serious illness. So the thing we can do, we can still proclaim mercy, we can still pray for mercy, we can still pray for people no matter where we are, no matter what our circumstances, no matter that we're locked in or we're not allowed to sing out loud, we can still pray for people and just be assured and persevere in the thought that those prayers can still be effective, they can still be powerful, because we have a powerful God whose chief attribute is one of being merciful to us and gracious to us in every way. The final one, the third one, is that he says you should be faithful. He said you should practice faithfulness, and the Message calls that commitment, and I think that's faithfulness. The other two have really been approaches to people. This one is about how we behave before people, but also how we behave before God. So he's looking for faithfulness in us towards him. He's looking for a commitment, as the Message says, towards him. He's looking for trustworthiness from us towards other people, and he wants us to practice those. And he wants us to practice those because that is, again, a chief attribute of God, that he is faithful to us. It says in Lamentations, which we seem to be reading a lot recently, it said, because of God's great love we are not consumed, for his compassion never fails. And they are new every morning, and great is your faithfulness. So that those attributes, that future of faithfulness, of trustworthiness. You know, I say to you, how much do people trust you? How much do they see you as being faithful to what you believe, to faithful to what you say, faithful in what you do? Because God is faithful to us, and our response to him is to be faithful to him and faithful and trustworthy to other people. And it's really important that we do those. I think there's two. I've covered two reasons why I think this is important. One is it's at the heart of God's nature that he is just and merciful and faithful. And if we're going to reflect him, then we sure need to be reflective of his character. We sure need to be reflective of the attributes that he sees as important. And as Jesus said in that verse I read from Matthew, he said, these are the more important things. These are the things that you should be doing. You should do the other stuff, but these are really, really important that you follow these. And as witnesses, then we should behave as if we are him and him in his place. We are ambassadors for him. Ambassadors tend to reflect the characteristics and the policies and the attributes of the country that they serve. And he's saying to us, you are my ambassadors, and this is what I'm like. These are the sort of things that you should be like. The second reason, and this is a bit more complicated, and I want to do a quick history lesson of Christianity, is that if we, as Christian, if you're watching this as a Christian, and if we do not preserve these characteristics, then there's a danger that they won't be preserved. Because these characteristics are intrinsically Christian characteristics that have come down the ages to us as a culture to be accepted as sensible, reasonable things to do. Because Christians first thought of them, or God first thought of them, Jesus proclaimed them, the apostles sort of wrote them down, and St. Paul wrote them down. And those started to become the norm behaviours, because they weren't normal behaviours at that time. And in some areas, they're not normal behaviours now. So it's no good saying it's common sense that these attributes that we regard as important in a Western culture are going to survive, because we need to preserve them. We need to keep emphasising them so that they don't die, because they weren't prevalent in pagan cultures. They certainly weren't prevalent in Roman culture at the time of Jesus, and it's taken 2 millennia for those to become intrinsically part of, if you like, a Western, I don't know if I can use that term for those who aren't Western, but a Christian perspective that has actually gone around the globe, but is a perspective that started and grew from Jesus. And these principles are things that we need to preserve in our society, because it's not necessarily there. If I give you an example, before about 300 AD, there were really very few hospitals around, other than perhaps military hospitals. But in that sort of period, the first hospitals, the civil hospitals, started to be developed. And they started to be developed because Christians in places like Rome stayed behind whenever they had a plague in order to look after the sick people. And does that strike a nerve? Does that strike, where we're at the minute? That people, in the NHS, and we've got some here today, have had to stay behind, and hospitals would not have, they've evolved from that those people stayed behind. The rich people, the way they avoided the plague was to leave, right? Which wasn't just. It certainly wasn't merciful, and it wasn't very faithful. And but the people who stayed behind were the Christian people, and they looked after it. And part of the reason that society became turned round and converted was because of that amazing love. So we have a responsibility to practice these things, and we have a responsibility to declare these things, because I'm not convinced that society on its own, without any foundation and any rationale for doing these things, would actually do them. And if you take an atheist perspective on this, and the most honest atheist that I've heard of is Friedrich Nietzsche, that most of us who are Christian go, "Whoa, no, he's an arch atheist." But what he was, but he recognised that atheism had no foundation for doing compassionate things, because it's all about survival of the fittest and just whoever can get by. I'm labouring this because I think it's really important. We have a responsibility to keep promoting these attributes, because they're attributes of God, and because if we don't, then there's no other foundation and basis for doing it. So let's keep doing that. And I really just want to finish with saying that I think as we do that, then we'll start to be reflecting what our Father is like, what God is like. And I know there's these other constraints on us at the minute, and those are not improper constraints, but we still need to, as Jesus said, focus on the big thing, focus on the important things, which are about justice and mercy and faithfulness, or fairness, compassion and commitment at this time. Thank you.